All right. Funny thing, we're talking about work-life balance, and some of the things that we are discussing here is actually some of the things that has been going on this week, and I'm funny enough going through that. So crazy timing. All right. So today we're going to be discussing work-life balance, right? What that is, what are some of the impacts when it comes to work-life balance? And also as a Scrum Master, what are some things, or even new going into the field, right? What are some things that you should be mindful of? Because it's important whether you're going through interviews or whether you're working already a working Scrum Master, or even if you've been in the field for years, right? There are a couple things just to be mindful of. Before we get started, right, we want to know what is work-life balance and why do we need it? Oftentimes we talk about it, right? But what is that? And how do we begin to model that in our life, right? So the explanation of work-life balance is work-life balance involves the minimization of work-related stress, and the establishing of a stable, sustainable way to work while maintaining a healthy general well-being. So that is the definition of work-life balance. Before we go any further, I also want to kind of have a conversation with you guys, right? Because typically when I do presentation, I like it to be conversational, right? And also informative. So to pause real quick, right? We have the definition of work-life balance. To kind of reflect that on you guys, what do you guys see as a work-life balance? Or if you were to define what a work-life balance is, what would that mean for you? And we can use the raise hand button if need be.
Did we lose a
Okay, I
presenter
see.
or just everyone just quiet?
No, I see. I'm just saying that. I see a couple hands up, right?
Okay.
So let's go with Umar. You're talking. Let's go with you. What does
Yeah.
work-life balance mean to you?
Yeah, sure. To me, it's being able to be employed at the same time, go about my personal life, day-to-day personal life, so I can juggle both my work and doing personal things for myself. So I feel like this remote work era has made that possible for most of us. Being able to work from home and take care of home as well. Sometimes even being able to leave your work and run quick to the store, do some errands that you wouldn't be able to do if you were at the office per se, right? You have to do a lot of things from home now. So we don't differentiate weekends and weekdays these days for most remote workers.
Good
That's
point.
yeah.
So it sounds like for you, having the ability to maybe take a step away from your workstation, right? And maybe able
Right.
to incorporate some activities when it
Right.
comes to maybe personal activities or household or life activities within
Right.
your working hour or whatever the case may be, right? Being able to balance,
Right.
because even sometimes when you think about it, right, when you work the 8 to 5 or 8:30 to 5 p.m., by 5 p.m., a lot of things are closed, right? So you
Right.
may not
Right.
have the opportunity to maybe do some errands that you may have the opportunity to do if you work remotely. Okay, so I see where you're coming from. I think
Yeah.
uh Kay, I think Kay have his hand up. Hey, I see that you're muted, but we can't hear you. All right. Any other thoughts on work-life balance?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. All right. So what I was trying to say is that work-life balance to me, is sort of finding an equilibrium, striking a balance between your work-related activities, trying as much as possible to work as effective and as efficient as much as possible, but then still able to step back from your computers or from your desk, say at the end of the day, and then find things that sort of helps you, recalibrate through the day's work, exercise, and then spend time with the family. So that's like striking a balance between your work, because sometimes I find that with the way of life now, working remotely, we tend to work more than the normal hours, right? Sometimes we get gravitated towards our computer. We don't know when to call it stop and say, okay, it's 5 o'clock. If I was working in the office, typically I would sign off and I would leave, right? But when you're working from home, your systems are staring at you. You want to get some stuff done outside the normal working hours. So it's hard, striking that balance between your work and then having other extracurricular activities to help you, like just losing up after the day's work.
Good point. Good point. Did I miss any hands or anyone? Okay, thank you. Thank you. You all made great points, right? And also, it proceeded to talk about, every sometimes we talk about work-life balance, but saying that there's really no magical formula, right, when it comes to balancing life itself, but it's all on how we try to manage things, right? The same way if you're a project manager or even a scrum master, right? There are some certain processes or certain tasks or activities that you would try to maneuver or manage, right? So it's kind of your life, right? There's no one fit all, because life is all about what works for you, what fulfills you, right? And how can you use that to balance work and personal life, right? Or personal habits. And then it goes on to talk about why do we need to have a work-life balance? And it proceeds to say that, a healthy work-life balance, right, drives engagement, productivity, and retention. It also has a detrimental emotional, physical, and financial implications, right? Let's break that down a little bit. When we talk about it drives engagement, productivity, and retention in a team, as a scrum master, or even you as a scrum master in your work atmosphere, what are ways that you think not having or having a work-life balance can impact those things? Engagement, productivity, and retention. Let's start with that.
I appreciate you.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I want to give it a try, Vicky. You mentioned productivity, engagement, and what's the third one?
Retention.
Retention, right? Yeah. So, like the gentleman just said, you want to be able to, balance your life with work and your personal life. If we were, like, say, the era where we're in the office, I had to be there from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. Uh, sometimes even stressed about, well, would I make it by 5 p.m.? Can I catch the store, be late? Would I be able to drop my mail? Would I be able to do this stop before they closed? You at work, but, worried about other stuff, right? Your focus is not there. You're not engaged. You're just kind of stressed. Oh, I have this thing I have to take care of at home. When I get home, I'll be so tired. Man, would I be able to look at this thing? Would I be able to do this tax at home? Maybe I should wait till over the weekend. So all these things going to getting home tired, going to bed maybe late, waking up in the morning, or you didn't have enough sleep, it will impact you on the job. You can't be focused. You're stressed, and sometimes you're just worried about how can I quit this job to get another job that will allow me to be able to, do these things for work from home. That's why you see a lot of companies are losing workers because they're not able to give them remote positions. So as soon as they find a remote position, they are leaving. So I feel like I've mentioned all these three things you talk about in my example. I will stop here.
Okay, good points. When it comes to engagement,
I'm not sure if it's on my end or your end, but sometimes you start speaking, I lose you. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Oh, okay. Let me try to speak a little bit louder. Even though I don't know if I can.
No, you're loud enough. You're loud enough. It's just like it goes off, like it cut off completely.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was asking, as a Scrum Master, right, or even in a Scrum team, right, how do you think work-life balance would impact engagement and productivity? And Rendell, I see your hand up. Do you want to go?
Yes, sir. I was on mute. But personally, I would say from personal experience, not having a work-life balance I'm not as engaged as I would like to be, because I'm in so many meetings that I then have to find additional time out of the meetings to actually get work done. So the engagement is just lacking right there. I just facilitate meetings and then move on, go to the next meeting. So that comes to the next one, the retention, especially going through a transition right now. There's so many KT sessions on top of regular cadence and I have meetings. It's hard for me to retain information, right? Because I have probably 3 different KT sessions within a day. How can I process all of those information you just thrown at me? So that's another one. I don't remember the third. What's the third one?
Good points, right? So it sounds like having too many meetings, especially meetings that may not be impactful to you, will cause you to get into the pattern of just going from one meeting to another, facilitating and not necessarily being present, not necessarily trying to impact knowledge or get something out of that meeting, right? It's more of, let me just get over this and move on to the next. Let me get over the next and move on to the next, right? So it also lack follow-up, lack what are the key points that we're actually getting out of this meeting, right? And then when it comes to productivity, that also impacts productivity, because if I'm in a meeting just to facilitate it only to move on to the next, am I getting vital information that is necessary to actually help my team to produce something, right? Or to be in a better space of productivity, right? So all of that impacts that aspect. And then when we try to personalize it too, right? When it comes to emotional, physical, and financial implication, let's talk a little bit about that. How do you think work-life balance will impact those things? Okay. Is it Sheila? You have your hand raised? Or Sheila?
Sheila.
Okay.
Yeah. I've had some situations where there wasn't any work-life balance, where like in one case, one of the people on the team said, "Can I have a day off so I can do my laundry?" And I've had times where for myself, if I knew I was going to have crazy hours, I said, I got to have more money, because otherwise I'm going to have to hire somebody to do all the things that I don't have time to do for myself. And I'm going to not be getting enough exercise. I'm going to eat the wrong foods. I'm going to be tired and grouchy and make mistakes. And so is everybody else on the team. So that's what happens when you don't have work-life balance.
Good point. I like the grouchy part. Imagine being in a meeting, being frustrated, like, here I am in this meeting again. Why do I need to be in this meeting, right? And also,
I get snarly when I'm that way.
and literally not also feeling like you're getting paid enough, right? Like you feel like you're doing 3 or 4 people's job and you're like, you guys don't even pay me enough to do all of this. And you still want me to produce. You still want me to give you the best of the best while I'm sitting here doing 3, 4 people's jobs. So I definitely can relate to that. For sharing that viewpoint. Any other viewpoints?
It's funny she said that because I actually had a developer today who said she needed a mental day off, and, and that was it.
What do you do in that case though? Because you really do not have authority to say, okay, here's a day off, take it off, right? You really do not have the authority to do that. So then what do you do in a situation like that, especially as a Scrum Master?
Well, I really couldn't do anything because I'm new to the team, and honestly, to be honest with her, I need a mental week off, so I could feel her pain. So I just someone was able to take over her tickets, and she took her mental day. So that's all I could do.
Cool. Ivy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute. So I think Scrum Masters, sometimes we forget that we are advocates for our team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And an unhealthy team will always produce like bad work. I feel like that's just based on my experience. And if there are no, one thing that I talked about a lot during my interview was psychological safety for my teams, right? And kind of setting that tone from the beginning with management and leadership, that is a key part of this whole process of Agile, right? If we're collaborating, we're communicating, we're interacting with people, that can be a lot mentally, right? Dealing with people can be a lot. So as a Scrum Master, one of the things that you do is you advocate for your team. You are basically, you're not just a coach, but on their behalf, if they want to take a mental health day, well, most of my team was contractors. So all I said was, well, as long as you get your 40 hours in, I'm okay. Take whatever day you need. And then let's look at the work, right? So sometimes they're like, I just need a couple of hours for them to maybe take their daughter to the hospital or to the clinic, or a couple of hours to actually, one of my developers actually told me I need a nap. So I said, okay, go take a nap. Just make sure you come back the time you tell me you come back. And I don't think if leadership was to ever approach me, again, as a Scrum Master, you are coaching them of the values that these developers will be able to produce once they are psychologically feeling safe and they're mentally whole. So just because, I don't want to say we don't have the authority. I think we do, because they're trusting us to actually lead the teams. And however we do that, as long as it's done, I think that's what matters.
So what are some things that you can do, right? So say, for example, a developer is bringing situations up like that. As a Scrum Master, what can you do to facilitate that process?
As far as if a developer needs a day off?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just a conversation of, okay, so where are you with your work, right? And a lot of times they started it. It's not like they're not going to come back. A day off doesn't mean that, they're not going to come back. A lot of times they just need rest. And then majority of the time, and speaking of work-life balance, because most of them are working remote, they're able to get that rest and then hop online after hours and still get the work done, right? So once you have that communication and that understanding between you and that developer, you say, okay, so this is what we're going to do. As long as you're able to pick up this work after you get your rest, our deadline or whatever it is that we need to deliver at the end of the sprint, when this is needed. As long as they understand that, I think that's when also as a Scrum Master, you trust your developers to actually do what they say they will do, right? So once we have that understanding, go do whatever you need to do. I'm not a huge proponent of constantly being on people to get things done. And I think a lot of times when you manage people versus lead people, you frustrate them. And a lot of times the value you're trying to get out of them, you don't get it because they're frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that viewpoint. Omar, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I agree. She made a valid point. Yes, and I actually have that going on with my team right now. They're very mature. We always do that. Like they'll say, "Hey, look, I got something to do. I'll take off 1-2 hours. I'll make up for it overnight." Trust me, they will come overnight and do their work. When we meet next day, done. So it's been going on like that. So I trust them. Like they always like, "Hey, I got something to do. Hey, tomorrow I gotta take off 2 hours, an hour. I have this appointment. Hey, go do it." They'll come overnight. They'll log in and get their work done, or stay, extra time and get their work done. It happens. So if you have those developers that, do what they said they would do, I see no reason why you would not let them, go do what they gotta do.
Okay, so it sounds like we've discussed or come up with, as a Scrum Master, it's important to understand that you're an advocate for your team and be able to either have a conversation with them to ensure that if they are taking time off, they are able to work the hours that they are being paid for, because that's important. Right. Also, how is their work, right? That if they are going to be taking time aside, right, to take care of whatever it is that they need to take care of, that it does not impact their productivity or the work that they're doing, right? And also, as a Scrum Master too, it's important to be aware that this is where I am, right? Be in tune with your state of being and ensure that you're listening to yourself and going according to what you need to be to stay insane, right? Because if you're not insane, your team is going to be chaotic, right? So it's important to also be mindful of that as well. All right, so I think we've spoken a lot. Did I see a hand up or? Okay, I see 2 hands up. I think I see, is it Manuel?
Yes, please. Yeah, can I speak, please?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so first of all, thank you so much. I think I like the definition that is put on the screen. It cuts across a wide range of, work-life balance, which is really nice. My question is that what if the organizational culture and the structure of the team doesn't really permit you to have a very good life, work-life balance in terms of, for instance, the workload, and the structure, the culture, the kind of work you're doing. You're a Scrum Master, but you are even doing business analyst jobs, some kind of testing, project management, or other stuff. So, and it's quite difficult for you to, push through to make recommendation, but it's quite difficult for kind of the implementation of these recommendations. So how do you go about it?
Anyone wants to take that? So.
Oh, she do it already. Remember that girl? Oh, no, the house in Dallas. She's doing it already. This year.
Can I speak?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask that question. So I'm glad he brought that up, because there are sometimes things are out of your, quote unquote, out of your control, right? But I think, as a Scrum Master, going into the organization in itself, you are going in to kind of shift cultures if they have already not been shifted, right? So if you're not going into a matured organization where they've been practicing Agile for a while, it is actually part of your responsibility to implement some of these frameworks and some of these principles and values that is within the Agile space and the Scrum, the Scrum role, right? As far as occupying other positions, right? I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that, you will be doing the job of a tester or a BA. I have done some testing for my teams and stuff like that. But I think the issue comes in, I think if I'm not mistaken, his question is mostly about what if you want to implement change or you want to suggest change, but it's not received. I think sometimes too is how we suggest those changes. Just merely recommending is not enough, in my opinion, right? So what are some tools, or what are some, for lack of a better word, facts do you have to back up your suggestions, right? Do you have it in writing, right? Do you have a plan? Do you have metrics or data pulled up to kind of show them results? Because a lot of these organizations, they're spending money. So if your plans and your ideas don't align with how they could be profitable and while being productive, they're most likely not going to receive it well, right? So I think let's not think of ourselves as mere Scrum Masters, right? We are change agents, right? We are going into these organizations to shift their mindsets, right? So the culture is not, and making that known in your interviews is also important, right? Say, this is what I do, this is what I've done, and this is what I look to come in here to do. And I don't think a lot of organizations are going to turn away. It will actually make them, but then setting the tone to say, I push hard, or, I don't take no for an answer, but then it's how you approach the issue or how you approach the change. I think that can also make a drastic, change, or, the process, it can shift it differently. It's just how you approach it makes a huge difference as well. So, but I think sometimes we think of ourselves so small as Scrum Masters, but we are actually change agents. Like, you can make a difference in the space, no matter how big or how small. You can make a huge difference. It's just how you approach that, change. I think that's important.
Thank you very much for this great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like also like he said, what if like your organization does not welcome that idea of work-life balance? Let's say per se, somebody wants to take an hour off, a developer wants to take an hour off to go do something about their personal life, and you as a Scrum Master might want to say, oh no, the company does not allow that. You cannot go. It's at your own discretion. Sometimes. Most organizations these days will let you allow that. For instance, my organization, you cannot schedule a meeting between 12 and 1 o'clock, regardless whether it's lunch or not. That 1 hour, 12 o'clock, the whole 12 o'clock is given to you freely to do whatever. You cannot schedule a meeting. Like, you cannot get someone to do anything within that hour, But let's say your organization does not, favor that, but if you have a good rapport with your team members and, you trust each other, you trust them to do what they say they will do after, I mean, it's at your discretion. I see no reason why you will not let someone that's working from home run down the store real quick, grab something and come back and make up the time if they'll have to, Just, I don't know what to say about that.
This is Felix. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. This question is directed to Ivy. Not to put you on the spot, but you did say that you need to show proof. When you are trying to advocate for the team to have a work-life balance. Can you please let us know some of the tools and metrics that you can use to back these findings? Because I do agree with what you're saying. That these companies, they are spending money. So if you're going there to advocate for, let's say you enter an organization that you notice that these people overwork and you're trying to advocate for them to, have their teams to be able to, have this work-life balance. What are some of the tools that you suggest that we can look into it?
So, yeah, thanks, Felix. So, I will just use an example. So I think a lot of you are aware of a lot of these layoffs that's been happening with, these organizations. So my organization, unfortunately, has been part of that trend, laying off about 80% of our digital space, mostly contractors. But we just rolled out a very important initiative not too long ago. And I noticed that because of our rollout, right? Every time you roll out an initiative or feature, whatever it is, you know, what you should expect is bugs, right? So if the bugs are coming in.
That makes me check with the cloud computing.
Sorry, somebody talking? Oh, okay. If bugs are coming in, then, you know, you would need a team to actually work on those bugs and fix the bugs so we can get them out to the customers. So when I heard of the news, I basically reached out to leadership as far as my director, my VP, my managers, and I pulled out a metrics of predictability and speed, right? How fast we've been producing these features and building this initiative, how predictable our teams are, and then putting it against currently, if they were to let those people go, the effect that is going to have on this initiative that we've rolled out, right? So putting numbers next to each other, being that even while we had the whole entire team, our speed was only about 75% because of lower environment issues or whatever it is, right? So having that metric pulled up and then saying, you limited my resources now to literally little to none, this is going to be my speed and this is the predictability of how we would deliver features and enhance this experience for our customers. And they looked at it and they're like, wow, we didn't even think about it. Like they were thinking about it from more of like a savings, or they're saving money, they're saving their budget or whatever it is. But not that they didn't have the customer in mind, they did, but I don't think they even dug a little bit deep as far as like the effect that is going to have on this huge rollout that we had going on in the Midwest, right? So it wasn't anything, it was honestly just a metric I pulled from Azure for predictability and another metric that I had run out on Excel for speed. And then I just told them like, this is going to be the effect. And with these results that I was able to pull out, this is how it's going to affect the process and the customers. And because of that little thing, you know, I was able to retain some of the contractors. You know, they were able to sit down with me. We went over the budget. I didn't even know that, you know, that was even something they were willing to do. But because I made myself available to advocate for my team, and not just my team, the customers as well, I was able to retain some of my developers to help me continue with this rollout that we had, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be anything special. You have resources within Jira, Azure, whatever it is that you use, but just make it make sense to them, right? You're not only saving money, your customers are going to be happy. Does that make sense? And they like to hear that because sometimes they don't think that deep. Did that answer your question, Felix?
Ivy. Yeah, I think, Ivy, thank you very much for the explanation. You've done a very great job with the explanation, and that is really good. Okay. I like the fact that you mentioned contractors at the beginning of your explanation. And what some of us are realizing is that when you are a contractor versus an employee, and you are trying to implement something, change, work balance, everything's, you know, is sometimes not easy because, you know, the employees, in other words, the developers and the architects even have more power in a certain angle, you know, than you. Sometimes, you know, so I don't know, because some of us are experiencing some, you know, those kind of stuff. So it's kind of, you know, they know that this is the right thing, but you also you are pushing forward, you're doing things cool, but you still also want to be careful in one way or the other so that you don't go too far, which may trigger them to, you know, rise against you, you know. But I really get your point, but I also say that there might be a limit that one should go, you know, in other words, in sustaining your job, because at a point in time, you see that when you get to a certain point that they are not receiving or some suggestions are not being taken into consideration, then you have to restructure yourself and make sure that, you know, you're able to still stay in and move along. Because sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, all your suggestions are very perfect, but sometimes you get to a point that especially if you're working as a contractor, then you may have to look at both sides.
Yep, I agree.
I agree. And I totally understand. And you're right. I'm speaking more from, you know, an employee perspective.
Yes.
And that totally makes sense. But I don't think it also hurts to even ask, like, what are my limits? You know, just sometimes internalize and say, what can I do versus what can I not do? And talk to a manager, talk to something. And it's just an idea. It's not necessarily you pushing it, but it's kind of like getting yourself out there in front of those people to say, I'm actually looking out for the team and looking out for the organization. But I totally understand. I agree with you 100%.
Okay, I see, Sheila, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Sometimes when there's a layoff coming, it's based on budget, where they say it's all contractors or it's all employees, because they're different budget line items in some companies. So it doesn't matter what they do. It's just, you've got to cut X number of dollars, and somebody above you has decided that many dollars have to be cut. So if you can convince them that you need to keep some people, that means somebody else is going to have to get rid of more people than they thought they would. There's just, you know, it comes down from, like, I don't know, division heads or something like that. It's way above that level. The other thing I was thinking about is when you talk about people taking time off, if it's only an hour or so during the day and they're working remote, how are you going to know they're not there? Unless you're tracking their movement constantly. You know, they could just say, oh, I had a little accident, I was in the bathroom or something like that. What are you going to do? You know, I mean, if they're taking a whole day, then they need to talk to you. But I mean, I've always found that people are going to, like, you know, get on a call and mute their phone and say, oh, I'm having a little trouble with my computer. Whoops, I unplugged it. Oh, too much static. I mean, you're not going to really know. So you might as well just try to find a way to cooperate.
True. I think even working remotely, oftentimes you see people say, oh, I'm having difficulty unmuting myself. Oh, my mute button is not working, or my speaker is not. So you're gonna have those excuses, right? Or those things that come up. I think for me, it'll be more matter of, is it becoming a pattern? And also, what time or what days does this often happen, right? Then maybe having a conversation with that person and trying to find a balance, right? So that does not become a behavior that is constant.
Oh, I had one time that told me that, well, but it was quality time when they hadn't actually worked as many hours. And it was very obvious to me and the rest of the team that they hadn't done what they were supposed to do and they'd missed deadlines. And I just looked at them and went, it's all supposed to be quality time.
I actually have this one developer that does that all the time. Each time she's assigned something, she's like, oh, my computer, my VPN is acting up. Oh, this is acting up. She would just text me like, oh, I think my computer is acting up again. I told her, listen, I had to pull her on the side too. I said, listen, man. I said, look, I understand what's going on, you know. Like, let's just make an effort, please. I don't have money to do, but yeah, we have to stop this. Yeah. She laughed and she said, I promise you, I will do it. Because like you said, they will lie, you know, they'll make up stories. Some would deliberately mess up your computer just to not do what you're supposed to be doing, you know. Yeah, but pull them to the side, talk to them, you know, you get the best out of them, trust me.
Yeah, I kind of tie into that discussion because I have been, when I started working remotely for a few months ago, I was like, a lot of distractions. I'm on my phone. A lot of distractions on me. So I was trying to figure out how to help myself on how to go about this. So I think everybody must have gone through that, and we are partners of the same crime. I'm ready to forgive each or understand where each other is coming from.
Good point. Good point. All right. So moving to the next part before bedtime is already hitting me. Moving on to the next part where it talks about why and what are some of the things that lead to lack of work balance, right? Because sometimes we talk about, I did a lot of research, right? Because sometimes we talk about work-life balance that happens at work, right? But there are also other impacts, right, that can cause us to or lead to that work-life balance. And some of the impacts or causes are increase of responsibilities at work, right? Sometimes you find yourself playing multiple roles, right? Or doing multiple things, having multiple tasks at the same time, aka multitasking, right? Or you're working longer hours or you're starting early and leaving late, right? So things like that, working longer hours than expected because of meetings are being scheduled later, or you have offshore team and you're starting late, but then you also have another team that's regular time zone that end up having meetings late, right? So you have those things that can also cause impact. Increased responsibility at home, right? Like we think about work, but what about in our personal life, right? In our homes, do we have increase of responsibilities at home? Having children, that also causes or impact work-life balance because now you have more children, or you have a child that maybe you didn't have a child and now you have one, or now you have multiple children, right? Even new job or new role, going into a new job or a new role that you're not familiar with, right? Because comes confidence, comes familiarity, comes understanding, you're able to manage things a little bit better. But if it's a new job or a new role that you're still trying to get accustomed to things, that can also impact work-life balance. Insecurities and lack of confidence in the work that you're in or in the new role that you're taking on, right? Competition with yourself. This actually I found very interesting. Competition with yourself or others. You go into a job that you're trying to show off. You're trying to show them that you're valuable, or you're also trying to compete with other co-workers, right? You're trying to show that you know better than them, or you can do better than them, or you want their job, right? So things like that can also cause work-life balance issues. Need to do well or more than others, right? Or you want to be seen. When you go to the meetings, you're the person who's always talking, right? You're trying to show off. Things like that can also impact work-life balance, because once you start doing that, guess what? Everyone will start reaching out to you for everything. Or once there's a meeting, they'll expect you to take lead or to foresee all of that information. And guess what? That's more responsibility and workload on you. Starting early and ending work late, right? Personal life changes like pregnancy, marriage, children, domestic violence, right? And this is actually also important because sometimes we deal with personal problems, abuse that even can cause us to have certain work-life balance, right? Financial problems, we need more money. So therefore we have to work more hours or work multiple jobs. Family problems, illness, death, all of that can also impact our work-life balance, right? And it's important for us to be familiar with all of this aspect of things that can cause work-life balance. So therefore, moving forward, you're aware and you know what to do, right? Because if the first step is being aware. Once you're aware, as far as in what is the root cause of my work-life balance, aside from the job being the job, identify those things, and then you can be able to come up with solutions on how to resolve them. Moving on to the next part that talks about things that can lead to lack of work-life balance as a Scrum Master, right? We talk about the general aspect of things, but now let's kind of bring it in, narrow it into, as a Scrum Master, what are things that can cause work-life balance, right? So it's one of the point is Scrum Master resisting control. It's important for you to resist control, right? Remembering that you're not there to manage or micromanage the team, allowing the team to evolve, right? And also knowing when to step back and saying, okay, you know what, I don't have control over this. I don't have control over you having mic issue all the time. I don't have control you running late to meetings because you have to drop your daughter off, right? I can talk to you about it, but I don't have control over those things. And I cannot stress myself with those things, right? Because one of the definition of lack of work-life balance also derived from stress. As a Scrum Master, your job is not to control the team or the stakeholder or anybody, right? Your job is to ask questions, make observation that would help lead people to that teachable moment or to where you want them to get to, right? Whether they choose to learn or not, it is up to them to make those changes. It's not up to you to force them to make those changes, right? You're there to guide, ask questions that would lead them to have that aha moment. Hopefully they do, right? And if they don't, it's also up to you as a Scrum Master to continuing, right? Encouraging them, empowering them to make those necessary changes. Also, being a Scrum Master is rather like being a mirror, right? You want to reflect what you're telling them to do, right? You want to reflect what you're seeing, right? Sometimes I say sometimes you have to kind of be a therapist, right? And you certain was like, it seems like this. I see this. It sounds like this, right? So you're giving them a reflection of what you have observed. And it's up to them to discuss if that's a reality. And if so, how can they change it? It's also not up to you to give them solutions, right? You want them to come up with those solutions because when you think about yourself, when you come up with a solution on your own, you're more likely to see that solution through than if someone just throws something at you, right? And this important thing it says flow is a psychological state when working of being completely immersed in what you're doing, right? So you want to get your team to get in a flow, in a steady pace where they want to do it. They're not being forced or asked to do it, right? But part of it is you coaching, guiding, and empowering them to do so and not coming off as controlling, right? Any questions so far? And once you do this, there are also things as a Scrum Master, right, that can impact the team dynamic and also work-life balances. One of them is team performance and productivity. I feel like this is something that no matter what company you go to, you're always going to find this, right? Where you have stakeholders talking about the team performance, productivity. They want to talk about, oh, the team committed to, I don't know, 40 story point, but they only completed 15. What's going on, right? They're always on your back about that. That can also cause stress, which can also lead to work-life balance, right? Team conflicts, when you have team conflicts all the time, you having to resolve team conflict, having to stay longer in meetings, right? Team workflow, when they don't have a flow within the team and you constantly have to coach them. Technology and terminology, when they don't understand the work that they're doing or don't have adequate skill set to the work that they're doing, right? That can cost more work on you when it comes to coaching, when it comes to finding resources and places to engage them in. Agile transformation, having a new team, that is really stressful, right? Because a lot of changes that is going on. And when you have a lot of changes going on, oftentimes it means having to stay longer, in meetings, right? Or having to start early, right? All of that can impact work-life balance as a Scrum Master. Even having mature teams that are stuck in their ways, right? Their way is the highway. Oftentimes that can cause stress, right? That can cause having extra meetings that we don't need just because you're trying to get them to break that cycle. Organizational structure and policies, right? Where they have certain policies that even you as a Scrum Master, you cannot help, you cannot do anything about it, right? Managing processes or people, even part of Agile Manifesto, right? It encourages us to not try to manage the process, right? Rather, interaction with the people. Micromanagement, as a Scrum Master, trying to follow up with every single item. Not saying following up is bad, right? But even how do you follow up? All of that, right, can come across. Are you trying to micromanage the team? And when someone feels like they're being micromanaged, guess what? The quality of their work would decrease. Their motivation would decrease, right? And trust would also be impacted. Those agile matrices, when you're looking at those matrices and trying to use that as a pinpoint for the team, right? Oh, today, this sprint, our story point was 15. Next sprint, our story point was 30. Next sprint, our story point was 20. Or we see a lot of defects. Those are good. Those agile matrices are good, but do not use that as the say or be all for the team, right? Inferiority complex. That can also play a role. Power struggle, right? Within the team itself. Lack of knowledge within either the domain or the skill set to do the work that you are ought to do, right? Having multiple teams. I've seen Scrum Masters who says they have 3, 4, 5 teams. That's a lot, right? The team not being in sync, whether it comes to understanding the dependencies, whether when it comes to understanding their cadences, right, their iterations, all of that can also cause impact on the Scrum Master's work-life balance, right? Changing priorities, this is the part I actually don't like. New requirements every day. When you commit to something, but then the next thing you know, the requirement has changed. All of that can also impact you as a Scrum Master, right? Your work-life balance. So it's important to also be mindful of these areas that can come in play when it comes to your duties and your role as a Scrum Master. Any thoughts on this or feedback? All right, silence is golden. Oh, Sheila, you wanted to say something?
Yep. I don't see, there's one I don't see on the list, which is conflicts with other teams, like infrastructure or a vendor. It's not really internal to your team, or not even if you're in a release train, not even within the release train. But it's still so, and it's something that you have a lot of times no control over. And it's something that there may be politics. And I had in my last role, there were multiple infrastructure groups, depending on which particular piece of software you were talking about. Sometimes you had to work with 3 different ones for each environment. And that was a challenge. I mean, I raised it up to management, but I didn't get a straight answer. But it was definitely something that was stressing out the whole team on a regular basis. Because some people in another group were on a power trip.
Good point, good point. So as a Scrum Master, I feel like there are definitely ways that we can talk about all of this impact, but I'm sure like there are ways that we can look into. Let's pick maybe 2 of this and talk about what are ways that what you can actually do to resolve that. For example, team conflict. As a Scrum Master, what have you done to ensure that that doesn't become something that will impact your work-life balance? Or we can even pick anything else on this.
I've had teams make agreements. I had one time where I had some people on the team that had really opposite work styles. And they were getting into it constantly because they didn't like each other's work style. So I finally had, we literally had a closed door meeting where we talked through what's actually relevant to the work and what's just personality. And if it's personality, let's leave it at the door. Literally made an agreement. And then every time they came running complaining about each other after that, I'd say, is it relevant to the work? And they'd go, no. But that did help us get through that project with those people, and it did pretty much stop the conflict because they kept trying to drag me into it. But that meant that as the referee, I could just always say, is it relevant to the work? And it pretty much never was. I mean, that was the worst case, but usually you do have to have those kinds of team agreements within the team about how you're dividing up the work and who's going to be asked to review and things like that. If you don't write it out and discuss it up front at the start of the sprint or at the start of the PI or whatever the team is going to be working together on, whatever increment makes sense, if you don't do that beforehand, you're going to have conflicts until you do it. And there's already going to be somebody who's going to be resentful when you get around to doing it. At least that's my experience.
Good point. Good point. All righty, let's proceed. All right, so in doing this, it also is important to be mindful, as a Scrum Master, be mindful of the Agile Manifesto, right? If we kind of look at one of the Agile Manifesto that says, Agile processes promote sustainable development, right? The sponsor, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Like when you reflect that to you and your job as a Scrum Master, right? Are you promoting a sustainable work-life balance, right? In the sense that this is something that I can sustain, that it does not impact my mental, emotional, and financial health, right? It does not impact the retention, productivity, and engagement with the team, right? So it's important to also keep that in mind. When we look at Agile Manifesto, we think about just the team structure, processes, and all of that the team should follow. But it's also important to kind of reflect on that when it comes to you as a Scrum Master too. Ask yourself that question. As I am working in whichever environment that I'm in, am I maintaining and promoting a sustainable pace of work, right? Because that is important for us to reflect on that as well. Use those Agile Manifesto, use those Scrum values and principles in our life as we work as a Scrum Master. So I just thought that was an Agile Manifesto that was that it was relatable when it comes to work-life balance. All right, so now let's dive into tips to promote work-life balance, right? So kind of did a little research and there are a couple articles that talk about ways that people can promote work-life balance, whether personally and also work itself, right? How they can promote those work-life balance. So one of them is prioritizing physical health, right? It's important to understand your health. If you feel like what you're doing is impacting you physically, whether you're lacking sleep, whether your eating habits have changed, whether you're gaining weight or whether you're losing weight, right? Whether now you find yourself ordering food, whether now you find yourself eating snacks here and there, right? And not actually eating nutritional food. Those are things that tells you that you are not prioritizing your physical health, right? And also another aspect of it too is if you used to work out and now you no longer work out, those are tell signs, right? So it's important to make sure while you're working, have the ability to ensure that you're eating healthy meals, right? Whether it's the day before, plan out your meal, right? Also make time to do things that promote physical health, whether you want to go to a yoga class, you want to go to the gym afterwards, you want to start setting a time to go to bed, so that way you can wake up nourished and ready to conquer the day, right? So those are things that you can do to help promote your physical health and also help when it comes to work-life balance, right? So set time. If I know I'm going to go to the gym at 6 p.m. and I end work at 5 p.m., guess what? If someone schedules a meeting after 5 p.m., I'm going to politely and respectfully decline. And of course, give them a reason why I'm declining. Hey, my work time ends at 5 p.m. and I have other plans, right? Can we schedule this another day, right? There's no problem in saying that, right? Because you have to set your boundaries and stick with your boundaries. Mental health, stress and burnout, right, is one of the biggest or two biggest impact when it comes to work-life balance. So it's important to seek mental health or someone, a support system, right? And oftentimes when we talk about mental health, we see that as a taboo, right? No one wants to talk about it, but it's important to have them. You don't have to have some kind of psychological problem. You can literally just want to talk about stress. You just want to talk about your work life, your work activities with them, or have a support system, someone you can bounce off of, right? I know oftentimes in job, they have those COPs or Scrum Sync. Use that to talk about stuff, not necessarily has to be about work. You guys can also use that to just vent or talk about things that are happening that you may not like, right? Or even start using that to set some boundaries for the other Scrum Master or managers that are in that meetings, right? Like, hey, I have a problem with people scheduling meetings after this time because my time ends at this, right? So literally, those are times that you can start hinting some of those things, right? But more importantly, have someone that you can talk to relieve those stress, right? And so you don't feel burnout, because when you keep it in, it burns you out. Another aspect of things is social connection, whether at work or in person, right? It's important to have some type of engagement, whether it's people you work with. Do you guys have happy hours? What activities do they do? If it's PI planning, do you want to go in person so you can meet the people that you work with, right? Socialize with them, and also have people you socialize on the weekends. Don't work on the weekends. Have people that you can hang out with, right? After 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., whatever your end time is, close your laptop. And even if it's, I'm going to just chill and watch TV, or I'm going to talk to my friend on the phone, have some kind of social activity that disengage you from any work activity, right? Because you have to set those boundaries aside. Occupational well-being. Do you take regular breaks at work? I know for me, this is something that I struggle with, that I would just work straight through. I don't even think about lunch break. What is lunch break, right? I just work straight through. And that's something we need to actually take breaks. Take your break, right? So that way, if it's getting up, taking a walk, and then coming back, don't just sit on the desk the whole time that you are at work, right? Stand up. They even have chairs where I think it will allow you to stand up and work. Like, invest in things like that. Go for a walk, right? Even if it's taking your laptop and walk to another room just to get on a call, right? Stuff like that can also help in relieving that that stress, and also help in managing work-life balance. Creating boundaries in your personal and at workplace, right? If I'm supposed to take my break at 1 p.m., guess what? I'm going to take my break at 1 p.m. I know something that I've done is, if I'm trying to take a break at 1 p.m., I will literally block that space. So no one is going to schedule meeting at that time. Even something that I do now is, if I'm in Eastern time zone, right, and my job is specific, I will literally block my beginning time to when I should start working, right? Because oftentimes, if you don't do that, people will just schedule meetings on your calendar, and meanwhile, you will start early and then find yourself leaving late, right? Especially if it's different time zones. So I will literally block the calendar. My start time is 11 a.m. and that's when I'm going to start. And anything above that, I am not available. right? And I will literally block my calendar because you're not going to put something on my calendar when it's not my time, when it's not time for me to actually start work. So it's important to start setting those boundaries. So that way it does not get away, it does not impact, your work-life balance. And also when it comes to restorative time, right? Even though you're working an 8-hour shift, sometimes it's good to just take a step back, right? Even if you're in a meeting, like tell them, I'll be right back. I'm not saying this is a good practice. Go get a sip of water and come back, right? Or do an activity that is not all about work. So that way your brain has time to relax and recalculate itself, right? So these are some tips when it comes to work-life balance. More tips. Take time off. I know it's hard when it comes to contractors, right? When you're a contractor, if you don't work, you don't get paid. And I know oftentimes that's what people say, well, if I don't work, I don't get paid. So I want my pay because that money hits differently when you don't work a day or so, right? But as much as you want to make that money, it's also important to take time off, right? And even, I remember even being a contractor too, when I turned into a full-time, even taking time off did not even come across my mind because I'm so used to, I have to work to make the money, right? So when I was even a full-time, taking off was a burden because that just wasn't what I was used to. But I had to tell myself, oh no, I'm getting paid for this, so let me take time off. Even when I was a contractor, right, or even as a contractor, I still take time off. Like if I feel like I need time off, I'm going to take it because guess what? Money does not buy health, right? So it's important to listen to your health and take time off if need be. And also something I see people, they are afraid to quit a job. Please never be afraid to leave a job, right? If that job is stressful or you feel like you do not have work-life balance, please, there are so many jobs out here. Do not feel obligated to stay. Leave that job, right? Or take a time off to really de-escalate and come back with your full with a renewed energy, right? The next one says, be mindful of the examples that you're setting. Kind of like preach what you teach, right? In the sense as if I'm telling people that they should not work on weekends, guess what? I shouldn't be working on weekends. I actually just did the same thing right now, whereas I have I have my Outlook on my phone, right? And I also have Teams on my phone. Whereas if I have offshore team, if they send me a message, I'm literally responding. But it's my off time. So why am I responding? If I get an email that someone sent an invite, I'm accepting the invite. Why am I doing those things, right? Those are subconscious things that you have to be mindful of. Just because even if it means taking away Teams from your phone, so that way you're setting those boundaries, do so. Or once you see those notifications, tell yourself, I'm not going to respond to that, right? Because I am off my clock. I'll respond tomorrow, and it's okay to do that, right? But sometimes because it becomes a pattern that now is something that we even subconsciously do. So it's important to be mindful of those things. Lastly, listen to your thoughts, your senses, your emotions. They would not lead you astray. So it's important to listen to what your body is telling you. If your body says that, hey, I'm stressed out of this job is stressing me out, guess what? Listen to that and do something differently. All right. How to know that you have poor work-life balance? Couple things. Stress. When every time you are constantly stressed at work, right? Fear to go to work. You'd be surprised. There are people who are scared to even start the day. There are people who are scared to go to certain meetings, right? That right there is a problem. Toxic work environments, right? Or even when you start spilling your work into your personal life. Aggressive or passive communication skill. When you find yourself always aggressive in meetings, right? Or you're frustrated in meetings, or you get to a point where you feel like you cannot even express yourself, right? Often distracted. Whether you're in meetings, someone is saying something and your mind is in 20 other places. When you're multitasking and not focused on one task. When you're working overtime, when you're constantly anxious at work, right? You feel like you're not good enough. You feel like you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Joining any and all meetings. There are some meetings that you don't need to be in, and you need to set those boundaries, right? Like, nope, I'm not going to be in this meeting because I am not needed or because it's a waste of my time, right? Constant need of validation, either from work or people around you. So that way you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? That is a telltale sign, and you need to know that. If you start going to your doctors and your doctor is telling you that you have high blood pressure, right? Or you start having these health consequences, that is a sign that you do not have a work-life balance. If you're unhappy with the work that you do, the people that you work with, or with your manager, right? Those are signs that you do not have a work-life balance. When you find yourself jumping from one job to another, right? Those are also signs that you do not have a good, you have a poor work-life balance, right? You don't have a good work-life balance. Any addition or any thoughts on this? All right, moving on.
I was just gonna make a funny comment, man. When you said people should not be scared to quit their job, it made me feel like when you said earlier, it's hard for you to take off, and even when you were full time because you were so used to working. So imagine thinking about quitting your job. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying, right? Especially us Africans here, you know what I mean. Oh my goodness, man. But yeah, it's true. Don't let this get to you, man. Your health comes first, man. If it's messing up your health, walk away from it. Whatever it is, work, anything in life that's gonna compromise your health, it's not worth it at all.
Sure. And then for new Scrum Masters going into the field, right? Or even existing Scrum Master, when you're looking for a new job, it's important to be able to do certain things about that company, right? So that way you have a clear understanding of what the work-life balance will be. Of course, the first thing, you want to research that company. Before you go into that interview, you want to research that company. Check your network for connection, right? If someone who knows someone that works in that company, right? Ask them about the work-life balance of that company, or even go on LinkedIn and research your interviewer, right? Or that company itself and see reviews on that company, right? Talk to people who are in that specific domain or industry and see what they think about it, right? For example, maybe people who have experienced agile transformation, they can give you a expectation of what you see, right? And that will kind of help you understand what your work-life balance will be with that company or with that specific phase that they are in. Check the companies on Glassdoor. Glassdoor is a huge space where you can literally research a lot of companies, right? You can get reviews, you can get salary, you can get all of that information from them. Where people who either have worked there before, they can literally tell you the pros and cons of that company, and that can enlighten you and give you enough information if you want to decide to work with that company or not, right? Even go on LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn is something that I use a lot, right? I will research my interviewers, I'll research that company, research who works in that company, right? And find out more information about them. And something important to look at too is the turnover rate, right? It's important to look at that. How many people are leaving that company? Or how many people are they letting go, right? That's also important when it comes to your interview, looking at those information before you go into that job. And things to look out for. After hours environment, what do they do? Do they encourage their employees to do some kind of after hour activity that does not require work, right? What is their lunchtime activity? Do they actually encourage lunchtime, or do they expect you to work through your lunchtime? Or do they say that if you're going to not take lunch, they will subtract it in your hours, in your daily hours, right? So those are things to look out for. Are there a lot of hours or overtime? There's companies that encourage overtime, even though to you that might sound beneficial, but remind you there are some companies that pay you by salary. So no matter how much overtime you work, you are salary paid. So you're not going to get any overtime hours, right? And also, if you do get overtime hours, how does that then play into your personal life? So it's important to look at that. Unpredictable schedule, right? Does your schedule changes all the time, right? Or maybe you have offshore team today, and then tomorrow they want you to now have co-located team, right? All of that would then have fluctuation on your changes. Your start time today started at 7 a.m. Then the next thing you know, next month you want to start at 12. The next thing you know, the other day you're having to start at 8 a.m., right? So those are things to also look out for. Pressure to not use all of your vacations. Funny thing, there are companies who will tell you, oh, we need you guys to be present throughout December because we need people to be here, right? Or or they will actually need you to give a reason why you're using your time off or why you're putting in PTO. It's like, that's your PTO. You worked for that. Why do I need to give you a reason for why I need time off, right? So things like that is important for you to look out for during your interview and before you go into a job. Now, as a Scrum Master, going into the job or going into another job, there are questions that you should ask on your interview when it comes to work-life balance. First one, can you tell me about the company culture and what makes it unique, right? This is kind of you trying to hear what the manager or the interviewer will say about the company itself. And some of the things to kind of look out for. The culture of the team. Do they promote, there are companies where they said, Friday at 12, after 12, no more meetings, right? Those are things you should kind of look out for, right? Or they're like, oh, Friday is half day, right? We're going to pay you, but just know it's half day, right? Or we encourage taking your time off. Or instead of, there are companies who do 2 hours of PTO for vacation. Whereas there are companies who do 4 hours, there are companies who do 6 hours, right? Those are things to look out for. What does your company do to help its employee maintain work-life balance? Literally, that is a question you can literally just ask straight up and get them to give you answer as far as in, do they prioritize work-life balance for their employee, or do they think that, hey, we are trying to get work done. So it's either you're going to come in and do whatever we want you to do and try to fit in. Why is this position open? You want to know, is it because there's a lot of people leaving the job, right? Or are they firing a lot of people? And if so, what is the reason that they're letting a lot of people go or a lot of people are leaving that job? That will tell you a lot about the company's culture and their work-life balance. What would a typical day look like for this position, right? Are they expecting you to have back-to-back meetings? Or is it, hey, work at your own pace, right? As long as the work is getting done, that's all we care about. Are they going to micromanage you on what you're doing on a daily basis, right? Are they going to be looking at your schedule, making sure that you're busy at all times? Would this position involve traveling? You want to know, do I have to travel every month? Do I have to travel on a weekly basis, right? If I live in Massachusetts and the job is in DC, what would that look like for me? Is this a hybrid role or is this a completely remote role, right? So those are questions that it will be important if you're going into a job, right, to ask on your interview so you get much insight. Any questions?
Yeah, everybody's speechless because you done said a lot. You said a lot, Victoria, and I mean, I don't even know where to start from. I like to say I appreciate you for this. That's what I'm just saying. Thank you. This is good. And it's refreshing. And for us always trying to take our time, to rest and recalibrate. And even if you're on a contract, you could just take, 1 or 2 days out. I used to work with a friend who was on a contract. 2 weeks, he's out to London and back again. She didn't care because she knew to have time off. So taking time off is important. That's what you have to say. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone have any experience that they've experienced when it comes to work-life balance and how they've been able to manage that?
Hey, this is Felix. Well, mine is a positive actually experience. I would refer the company that I'm working for right now. I remember on day one when I met with my manager, she made it clear to me that this company values the personal life of the employees. So what they care about is you just getting your job done. They don't care what you do during the day. All matters is you are able to get the work done. And she actually encouraged me to, you could take a walk in the park when you're tired. You could go outside and work from outside because it's very important to at least go outside once in a while. Because, as we find ourselves working remotely, you could find yourself being indoors for even the whole week. You've not even stepped outside. So if you find yourself in such an environment, it's a plus. But sometimes that's why the information you just shared about, researching about the company before you apply is very important. So you'll be able to find out that, is this the right fit for me? Because as you're trying to look for a job, you also need to make sure that the place you're going to is going to be a place where, you can be able to be sane. It's very important. Your sanity is very important and your health is very important. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any thoughts, ideas, concepts?
I worked in one company where I would ask people after they'd had an interview how things went, and they said they'd come back laughing and say, "Oh, we lied. We told them that it was like a picnic. It was like a country club. They would go home on time every night. There were never any problems." Meanwhile, everybody was working like 60 hours a week instead of 40. So you can't go by what they tell you on the interview and believe it's the truth, even if you interview with several people, because everybody knew that was the party line they were supposed to say. But I did notice that with one company I was looking at that I'm not sure I want to look at now, I knew a bunch of people that had gone there a couple of years ago. They've all left. And they were pretty high up in the organization. So if they left, either they got pushed out for some reason or they couldn't take it. And they weren't. Either way, I want to find out from them why they're not there. In addition to looking at things like Glassdoor. Oh, and I did have one guy who was a VP at a company who said, yeah, when things were slow, we'd spend time writing fake reviews to put on Glassdoor. So you can't always trust those reviews either.
True. I agree. Yep. People surprised our employees are encouraged to do that. They will go on there and put positive comments themselves. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this was a VP